Okay, this is Mrs. Sandra Augustus, and would you tell us a little bit about what you're wearing today, and then you can go into describing some of your other dresses.
Okay. During the 1860s, Empress Eugenie, who was Napoleon III's wife from France, was the fashion trendsetter. So they lived in France, and that's where all of our fashion designs came from. Ladies collected magazines at the times that had fashion pictures in them, and they would cut out the pictures and take to their dressmaker, or if they didn't have a dressmaker, they made the clothing themselves. But our dresses are made a certain way as to emulate Empress Eugenie. She was supposedly a beautiful lady. She was an empress, very wealthy, so she had full, gorgeous dresses. They said she had a tiny waist, so you can see that design in the dresses that they wore. And also she had very pale skin. So everything that went into these dresses was to make you seem more like Empress Eugenie. The dresses were made so that the shoulders dropped over the shoulders. That made your shoulders seem wider. Of course, the fullness of the skirts made your hips seem wider. All of that then made your waist seem smaller because you wore an underclothing called a corset. And a corset didn't make you smaller, but it made you seem smaller. It just sort of would hold in the pudginess around your waist. A lot of false reports as to pulling them too tight and you couldn't breathe. That's mainly in the movies. Actually, a corset is something you wore every day, and it felt good, and I wear mine, and it makes my back really feel good. So it was just part of the underclothing. The silk dresses, all of the ones you see back here, were probably their best dressed. The upper class people would have had lots of silk dresses. Middle class people didn't have a lot of clothing. They may have a cotton dress that they wear around the house to do work in. Maybe it could be washed. Many of the cottons couldn't be washed because the dyes would fade out. They washed in boiling water in pots of lye soap. In pots with lye soap. So therefore, if you tried to wash a silk dress, it would crinkle. If you washed the wool dresses, as this one, they would shrink. So, as I said, with the cottons, sometimes the dyes would fade out. You know, there were cottons that you could wash, and you would use those for working in the garden, cleaning your house, that sort of thing. But as I said, some of the middle class women would have had a silk dress to wear to church for their best dress. Visiting was their main social thing to do. You visited people, they visited you. Whenever a visitor was coming to your house, you would put on your best dress. When you went to visit, you wore your best dress. And then other times you could wear your work dress. You always had proper underclothing that made the dresses look the way they did. I've told you about the corset. They wore cage crinolines, and I do, have some I can show you. The cages, the hoops in the cages were made out of watch spring metal. It was the same watch spring metal inside men's key wound watches. And it was very flexible, very lightweight, and so they made hoops out of the watch spring metal. Then they attached each hoop to a cotton tape that went up to the waist, and that would hold your dress out without being hot. The air goes underneath it. It's flexible. You sit in it, and so that was a great thing, because the ladies in the 1850s had to wear petticoat over petticoat over petticoat, starched stiffly to make their dress full enough, like Empress Eugenie's dresses would be. The styles of the cotton, of the wools and the silks, there were many styles. There were 3 types of arms, sleeves you would have. You would have either a big wide pagoda sleeve, such as this, or a coat type sleeve, such as this. And back there, the cotton dress back there has a bishop's type sleeve. It's sewn in at the arm's eye and then comes back down at the cuff. If you have sleeves that come all the way to your wrist, well, that's all you need. If you have these pagoda sleeves, you need another type of underclothing called an undersleeve. And it ties up here at your elbow and then comes down and covers the bottom part of your arm. And you'll say, well, now why were they doing that? Remember Empress Eugenie and her pale, pale skin? You didn't want your skin to be tanned. So you completely fully dressed. You wore gloves when you went out. Even your bonnets, the brims sit way back on their heads. They looked always like they were falling off. So that didn't help your face much. So you carried a parasol that you would put up in the between you and the sun, and then that kept your face from getting suntanned. Shoes, I have on Balmoral shoes. They were low-top heels because you were supposed to glide along. In the 1860s, ladies were ladies. They glided along. Your skirts didn't move very much. But right after the Civil War, things changed. Dresses got flatter in the front, flatter on the sides. Big bustle developed out the back, and then the ladies started wearing the heels. And with the heels, it was a completely different movement. And they said ladies never again seemed as ladylike as they did when they were wearing these full dresses during the Civil War era.